It is Wednesday, my dudes. That means it's time to crank up your podcast app of choice to 5x speed and tune your dial to the Influence Podcast with me, Matt Silverman. Hello. It's a show about internet creativity and online social movements and the connective tissue that makes this great internet and the World Wide Webs worth pulling your car out on this information superhighway, cruising down, picking up maybe some groceries and some entertainment and some fascinating, fun and exciting experiences along the way. This week, I am planning for my interview with Matt Hobbs, creator and composer of Puppy Songs. It's a social media account on the TikToks and the Instagrams of this world and the YouTubes, where he writes hilarious and highly relatable hashtag. You might even say hashtag relatable songs about his two adorable dogs. And this thing has caught fire, blown the doors off the internet. Started, I believe, as a pandemic project when music, live performance in Mr. Hobbs's area and the world was sort of closed down and shut down. And he said, you know what? I got my two cute pups here, and I got a phone. Let's have some fun and bring some fun to the people. So I'm very excited to talk to Matt and get down into the weeds on his inspiration and creative process for this account, how he makes a living as a musician through this content. And there's still time to get questions in for him. I have quite a few questions and comments and fan responses on Instagram, YouTube, and voicemail. So if you are a fan of Puppy Songs and you are excited for this interview, please send me an email, record a voicemail, pop into the Discord, or leave a comment on the Patreon. And let me know what you want to talk about for this interview. There is still time. And all those links and all that information is in the show notes of this audio podcast and also in the video description of the YouTube version if you're watching the video version. And speaking of watching, that is something that blind people and visually impaired people, they don't do that. Okay? If they are hitting play on the YouTube version of this video, then they're only listening. And I thought about that quite a bit in the last couple days, because as I was making notes for this week's episode and gathering up some wonderful responses to last week's episode, which was about accessibility in video games, specifically blind and visually impaired people, creating modifications and advocating for native accessibility tools in our favorite video games, I took note that so much of our language around internet consumption is about views, page views, YouTube views, TikTok views, video views. How many views are you getting? And it just struck me as, if I was a blind person and I was clicking play on my favorite YouTube video and enjoying and consuming the content and getting all that beautiful entertainment and information from said YouTube video, the way that would be measured by the world and by the internet at large would be a word, a piece of language that does not accurately account for the way I consume that content. And I found that fascinating. And I think my guests from last week's episode would probably have a good laugh and be pretty good natured about it. But I am here to say that it is suddenly more top of mind and more prescient. The ableist language, I suppose, that we use just all the time in our everyday life, especially on the internet, which we perceive as such a visual medium, and yet there's so much more to that picture. So, and I'm noting that because I am very grateful for the wonderful response that I received from that episode a nice influx of new listeners and viewers, and a nice uptick in conversation around that episode. People seem to really enjoy it, and as part of that, I made a note that I discovered the mod for Balatro, made by my guest Ori on the episode, um, on the subreddit r/games, which is a video game news and discussion forum that I frequent, I don't know, 17 times a day. It's a problem. And that's where I discovered Ori's mod, and I observed a lot of really wonderful conversation and gratitude for the mod, because people were very excited. Blind and visually impaired people were very excited to play Balatro for the first time. And so I was like, this is so cool. I reached out to the person who posted about it, and I said, are you interested in an interview? Are you interested in, could you connect me with relevant folks in the blind community who are excited about this? And they passed me along to Ori, who then passed me along to Sightless Combat and O'Hiley, and that was the origin of that that episode. So I thought I would reach out to the moderators of r/games, and say, hey, this episode began from a discussion on the subreddit. Would it be okay if I brought it full circle and said, hey, I don't want to be self-promotional, but would there be a way to bring the conversation about this back? And so they were like, yes, if you post it in this way, your account is not, spammy account, promotional account. So this would be cool to do. And so I shared it there and got some really nice response. And I bring it up because, like, if you've ever posted to Reddit, in its more modern incarnations, you post, and then the sort of analytics of your own post, you can see how many people are engaging with your post. And according to Reddit, this post has 98,000 views. Again, the metric is I'm posting, hey, is there anyone in the blind community who might find this useful or interesting? Let me know. And here's a post that has 98 views, quote unquote. And views in this context are certainly just people who scrolled past it as they scroll the feed, being like, oh, I viewed it. Like, that doesn't mean people are listening to the show or viewing the whole content or chiming in the comments. But it was a nice little bump in exposure for the show. And it led to some really wonderful discourse on YouTube and on Reddit itself. So I want to shout out a particular Reddit user by the name of Burning Flannery, who left a comment on the post on r/games. Burning Flannery writes, visually impaired gamer, been playing since the NES was the hot new thing. Burning, same, you got me there. That was where I discovered my love of video games, as I'm sure many people listening. Also PC games, of course, but those kind of grew in tandem in the late 80s, early 90s. Burning says, the stuff that's going on in both native and modding accessibility is a dream come true. All my life, I've had to engage in obnoxious workarounds just to enjoy my favorite hobby. I'm totally pumped to see the profile of game accessibility rise year on year. Thanks for taking time to talk with the blind community. I think even within accessibility, we get overlooked because sighted people have trouble conceiving of us playing games at all. I'll check out the show and I'm looking forward to it. Big yes, big same, big agree, because literally I too, upon finding the Balatro mod, was like, I cannot conceive of how blind players enjoy games. And that was the reason why I had to reach out to these guests and get them on the show. I was completely educated top to bottom during the course of the interview. And it is my hope that you listeners and viewers were also similarly fascinated and informed by it. So we had a little discussion on the subreddit, and then Burning Flannery went on to say, after they listened to the episode, interesting conversation. You asked a question about developer incentive that I think went unanswered. The incentive, so I asked, like, why would it be in a developer's interest when they are spending so much time and money and labor costs and everyone's overworked and all these games are like, if we don't make a profit, if we don't make millions, then our studio is going to go under, we're going to have layoffs. Like, the game industry is in dire, well, game industry has never been more profitable. Billions and billions in profits, record profits. It's a huge, it's surpassing movies and television and publishing and whatever. And yet, massive layoffs and all this shit. So the games industry is broken for a variety of reasons, but I sort of asked the question in that context of like, man, it seems really hard and fraught to make games. So what is the capitalist incentive to put time and money and labor into adding features that a proportionally small chunk of players would spend money on to buy the game, right? And Burning Flannery goes on to say, the incentive, as I see it, is twofold. First, encompassing as much of the disabled demographic as a developer can and will, without a doubt, yield profit. In aggregate, disabled people encompass a huge breadth of consumers. The key there is the aggregate aspect. Getting developers to invest is the tough part, since pure altruism and capitalism really aren't bedfellows. Preach. I'm saying preach. And the guests did echo that sentiment, and that was really really eye-opening. Ableist language. That was really fascinating to me, because I think I and others, as Burning says, viewed the blind community as a small subset, but then they said, well, if you make accessibility tools for one subset of disabled video gamers, there will be sort of unintended results that would open accessibility up to other groups that you didn't think would be affected by these tools. And those groups and those players in aggregate would make a meaningful impact on sales and profits. And that's awesome. Burning Flannery saying that. The guest also said that, and that's just something I did not conceive of. Burning Flannery goes on to say the other incentive, cynically, is press. And that it is, the public is realizing that they like and want accessibility features. It's cheap and perhaps a touch public relations, but basically saying that, like, doing this is good PR. And how much value does that have? PR has value. So I'm of two minds about that. One, I'm worried we live in a post-PR world. And by that, I mean, like, you can say and do the stupidest, shittiest, and most fucked up things in the world. We have political candidates who go on television and say the most insane things that formally would tank a campaign, and yet somehow have no effect on the efficacy of, a person's political ambitions. You have companies that are, laying people off and abusing workers and have toxic workplaces where people are sexually assaulted and abused and not paid living wages and the most horrible, horrible things. And yet, after one day of bad press, that does not, it's back to business as usual, where we don't seem to have any meaningful effects on the bottom line of companies. So on one hand, I am fearful that PR doesn't matter, which is crazy. And on the other hand, totally agree with Burning Flannery's take here, which is that when you are the good guy corporation, when you treat consumers with respect, when you add accessibility features to your product that may not serve me personally as a video game consumer, but when I see it, I'm like, yeah, this is great. And I'm glad this exists. I am more likely to spend my money on this game or this company. Um, yes, that does have market effects on your product. But I'll take it one step further, which is germane to this show, which is that I think there's a world where individual influencers, streamers, YouTubers, game, culture people on the internet can latch on to a single accessibility feature and say, "Hey, I'm able to stream this game because it affects me personally," or "I may or may not be affected by this, but isn't it so cool that this feature is part of the game? Let me talk about it. Let me talk about why it's so important." I think that sort of, let's call it a cult of personality in a good way, the good cult kind, not the bad cult, that can really empower very, very loyal audiences to sit up and take note and say, "Oh yeah, like this game that I already thought was cool and might be interested in buying or playing for 40, 50, 100, 500 hours. Um, isn't it great that I can play it with all the players, not just a subset of players, not just a mainstream category of players?" That conceivably could move needles in terms of sales for video game companies. So Burning Flannery and all the folks who took time to check out the episode and leave feedback and appreciation for my spectacular guests. Thanks so much. Thanks for checking it out. And I'm really glad it was useful. It certainly was useful for me. It's going to be time to take a quick break before we get into today's main topic. But before we do, we of course have to thank all the people who support this show on Patreon at any tier, whether that's just subscribing to the newsletter or subscribing at $1 or $5 and getting ad-free episodes, so you don't have to hear any of this nonsense. But for the purposes of every episode, we have to say thank you to the executive producer tier, which contributes $10 or more every month. And those people are Ken M., Bowie Barks, Dominic Kerr, Jerry Duran, Duran, and of course William. And I'm just going to say what everyone's thinking. We don't know William's last name. He or she or they goes only by William, but I'm just going to say it. I think it's Prince William, who is the Prince of Wales, right? And the heir to the throne of England. I can't say with certainty that it is him, but let's be honest. He's got $10 to spare every month, and I'm sure he wants to keep it on the down low. So I'm sorry for doxing this executive producer, but I'm pretty sure it's Prince William. So Prince William, thank you. I salute you. I hope everything's going well in all the royal things that you need to do. I don't know, but thanks for supporting the show. And we're going to take a quick break, but after we come back, it's time to talk about copyright, fair use, accessibility again, but accessibility in a very different way. Keep your dial tuned right here. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining me. And it's time to talk about the main story of this week's episode, which is the Internet Archive. You know it, you love it. If you've been listening to this program for any length of time, probably familiar with what the Internet Archive does. It is a nonprofit, and it is a free website that collects media so that if the old internet burns to the ground, or companies decide to remove or block accessibility to said media, or certain websites just disappear from the internet or go offline or have no financial incentive to keep doing internet stuff, then the Internet Archive is a place to say, hey, we've saved it all. We've saved as much as we can so that historians, academics, researchers, students, the public can say, hey, remember, what did that politician say in 2004 when they were talking about this issue that is suddenly very important? Oh, let me click back. Oh, wait, that website, that news organization is gone. But now we can go back and see the Wayback Machine and find out what was said. Hey, this book is no longer in print. There's no way to get it. But good news, the Internet Archive has scanned it, and now I can incorporate that into my, I don't know, my doctoral thesis. Hey, it's the year 3128. How did all those ancient humans live in the year 2024? I don't know. Oh wait, we have a whole record of it. Put it in the museum. It belongs in a museum, as a famous archaeologist once said in a movie. The Internet Archive, as of this recording, as of September 5th, 2024, mere days ago, the Internet Archive contains 42.1 million printed materials, 13 million videos, 1.2 million software programs, 14 million audio files, 5 million images, 272,000 concerts, and over 866 billion, that's billion with a B, 866 billion web pages. It's going to take me a long time to read 866 billion web pages, but I'm going to do it. Lawnmowers and old-timey propeller planes at the same time flying over my... Where? Why? I'm podcasting. This is a long time coming type of story. And it is in the news again because the Internet Archive this past week lost its appeal in an ongoing legal battle with the four major publishing conglomerates. If you don't follow publishing, and why would you? And I don't really necessarily either, but basically all of book publishing has been consolidated into about four companies, which is not great, but it is what it is. And they have been fighting with the Internet Archive over the accessibility of scanned copyrighted books in the Internet Archive. And so they have been going back and forth in a legal battle, which started, let me get this right, June 16th, 2020 was when the lawsuit was brought against the Internet Archive by these four companies: Hachette, HarperCollins, Wiley, and Penguin Random House, the only places on earth where you can still get books. And this came out of a fascinating occurrence situation, which was the Internet Archive acquires copies of books. So they legally purchase a book. Dune. That's a book, right? A cool book. I don't know who publishes the Dune series. So they get Dune. and then they scan the entire book digitally and create an archive copy so that if we lose all the Dune books or they go away or whatever, we could go back and check out Dune, right? And then they had a digital lending system, which is like, okay, we legally own the book and we have scanned a digital version, and then you can anyone, the public, a student, an academic researcher can borrow the book digitally, and they can only borrow one at a time. So if I borrow Dune, I can borrow it digitally and read Dune for 2 weeks from the Internet Archive. If I have checked out the book, you cannot borrow it while I'm reading it until I return it to the library, and then you can take it out. And guess what? Your public library also does this exact thing. It is what do they call it? It is called own to loan. It is an own to loan ratio, which means if a library possesses one book, you may loan it out digitally one at a time. And essentially, this is how physical books work too. If your local library has one copy of Dune, I can only take it out if it's on the shelf, right? And so it's an own to loan ratio, and it is also a system called controlled digital lending, CDL, which the Internet Archive has been doing with no problems, no drama since 2011. Here's where things get a little dicey. In March of 2020, there was this thing. If you were watching the news, it was this little thing called oh shit, what is it? The COVID-19 pandemic, which killed millions of people and prevented all of us from interacting with human beings and going to schools and going to jobs and going to libraries. And so, in an effort to make culture and books and knowledge accessible to the entire world, the Internet Archive was like, oh, hey, we have all the books. And we could, what if we temporarily paused the own to loan ratio and created what they called the National Emergency Library, which suspended wait lists on all books so that students, researchers, and the public could access knowledge at a time when it was not safe to go to libraries or schools or bookstores to buy the books or borrow the books. This was met with what seems to be, according to my research, universal praise and acceptance from the academic community, the public, and just people who like books. It was temporary. It was an emergency situation. However, publishers, the Authors Guild, and Congress was not a fan of this sudden, bursting open of accessibility to copyrighted materials. Okay. It was an unprecedented moment in modern history, but okay, we're figuring this out. But then in June 2020, a few months after this sort of open source, open access thing became a thing, Hachette, HarperCollins, Wiley, Penguin, Random House sues the Internet Archive for, quote, willful mass copyright infringement. And their argument is connected with this concept of CDL, controlled digital lending, and also a first sale doctrine, which is it's part of copyright law, as I understand it, not parentheses, not a lawyer, parentheses, not an expert. I would like to talk to an expert on all this. First sale doctrine, which is basically, I guess it's enshrined in copyright law. I don't know if this is it's not in the Constitution, but some sort of copyright statute, which is if I buy a book or a dongle or a widget or a sandwich. I don't know. I own the widget, and then I can then sell that widget to someone else if I so choose. Because I have ownership, I have obtained ownership, I can then sell it to another person. This is harder to do with digital assets because hey, if I have a file of something and I sell you the file, I still possess the file. So is it a new version of the thing, or is it the same thing from a copyright perspective? If I digitally reproduce something, is it the same something or is it a new something? And this is fascinating to me because I think the Internet Archive made a critical error in their calculus about this emergency lending and their legal defense when trying to justify this access to copyrighted materials. They're claiming that copying a physical book into a digital version is a transformative act, which then might be covered under fair use. And basically, the publishers seized on this in their legal argument against the Internet Archive and said, no. Fair use is I'm taking a chunk or a portion of a copyrighted work and then criticizing it or remixing it or transforming it, as the name implies, into some other piece of art or culture or criticism or academic research or whatever. Simply scanning a page and then putting that page in its exact same form on the internet is not transformative. The other aspect of this, which is interesting and complicated, is that I think to prove that you are harming the rights of a copyright holder, part of that is about damages to the copyright holder and the intention of the entity or person infringing. So by that I mean, if I buy a book and then I scan the pages and then I give it to 5 friends or sell it to 5 friends who wanted the book and would have bought the book, I am willfully profiting and or infringing on the work of the copyright holder, right? That's no good. The Internet Archive's intention as a nonprofit was never to profit or damage the copyright holder. Their intention, at least as their mission statement and founders and operators present, is to make knowledge accessible and to preserve knowledge. Their intent is not to harm copyright holders. On the other side of that coin, the publishers in the lawsuit are making these very, very pointed arguments and saying, this action is harmful to authors who are struggling, and the publishing industry is so hard, and writing books is so hard, which it is. And authors are they're just scraping by. So this is harmful to authors who make a living by selling books. And is that statement true? Yes, it is. But also, to me, this is just my hot take. It's disingenuous because this is the publishing industry trying to claw back and scrape back whatever meager / unproven profits they feel they are getting harmed by a nonprofit internet library saying, hey, maybe kids and students should be able to read books if they can't get books. So whatever damages they're claiming, I'm sure it's $100 bajillion, gajillion dollars, whatever. But to me, this is 4 conglomerates saying, hey, we wish we had more money. So we're saying, you're hurting authors. That dichotomy is a little icky. But are the publishers correct? Philosophically, legally, and ethically speaking, I think they are. And clearly 2 courts, whoever ruled on the original lawsuit, and now this court of appeals is like, this is definitely not fair use. And also you are probably you are damaging and infringing on the copyright of these publishers. Where this nets out is sad to me and to many people who are advocates of media preservation, because the result of this is that giant publishing conglomerates will make a few bucks proportional to their operating revenues. They will get a few million more dollars. Congratulations. And the byproduct of that is that the Internet Archive, the digital library of Alexandria, is probably going to be sued out of existence and maybe lost forever, because this lawsuit is not looking good for them. And there is also a $400 million lawsuit brought by music publishing licensing conglomerates that also is probably not going to be a good time for the Internet Archive. So, like, again, it is a symptom of our current capitalist moment when I say these companies are correct in their lawsuits. And by doing so, they are also setting fire to the Library of Alexandria and burning it down, which is damaging to the internet and to humanity. We have and had a beautiful thing, and it is going to be destroyed so a couple of CEOs can buy, an extra yacht or 2. I'm editorializing. I don't know what they're going to do with this money. And the Internet Archive, you done fucked up. You did a good and positive thing that crossed the line. You poked the beasts, and you are paying, and that fucking sucks. And it's bad. As usual with these things, I have a hunch that preservationists and academics and archivists and concerned internet citizens will somehow, some way, rally around this and somehow save the like gajillion petabytes of data on how we move this data around and save it. It's just mind-boggling. I don't know how we save it all, but they will somehow gather it and sustain it and fund it and bring it underground somewhere else on some other servers, so that if the Internet Archive as an entity is sued into oblivion, the work and the data and the stuff to be preserved is somehow moved to another internet museum. I don't know. That is the most pressing and interesting thing that I will be watching. Keeping an eye on for the foreseeable future. I would like to speak to a copyright expert about all of this because, so I should say, I am my research for this discussion is based on a couple sources. One, it's an article in Wired, which I will link to in the description of this episode, about the latest loss of the appeal, and also kind of rehashes the backstory that it reiterated about digital lending and the original lawsuit. So that was a good primer. And then there's a wonderful YouTube channel called All Things Lost, which I am, after I'm done recording this, I'm going to reach out to the person behind All Things Lost, because it's a YouTube channel about media preservation, which I am just obsessed with and fascinated with. And it's these deep dives into like, hey, here's a weird Michael Jackson video game that was never made, but we found it in a garbage can, and here's what it looked like, and here's the people who worked on it. Nobody ever knew about this, but here it is. Here's some bizarre VHS tapes we found at a garage sale, and it has all these weird, infomercials on it. What's this all about? Here's some creepy ass weird SpongeBob episodes that were too crazy for television, and they never aired, and no one's ever seen them until now. Like, All Things Lost. So I really want to have the creator of that channel on the show because I think it's fucking rad. And also, this person did a really deep dive into the history of the Internet Archive's book lending program and system, and how it all went off the rails during the pandemic and led to these lawsuits. So if you are interested in going deeper on this topic, I will link to those two sources in the show notes. And also, I'm in touch with a prominent copyright lawyer who we were trying to get a show put together around when Steamboat Willie was entering the public domain, and there was all this wonderful discussion of like, okay, like Mickey Mouse, an iteration of Mickey Mouse, the most like copyrightable, protected piece of IP you could imagine, was suddenly becoming like available for anyone to use. And I had a conversation with her. I was like, what does this mean? How can people use it? And it was a very fascinating look at like, well, you can't claim to be Disney and say, here's Mickey Mouse, but you can say, here is Mickey Mouse as Steamboat Willie in my cool horror video game where Steamboat Willie gets his head chopped off. Like, yep, go nuts. You can do whatever you want with Steamboat Willie as long as it is a transformative work. So that was very fascinating. So I'm planning to reach back out to her, and I believe her husband or partner was also integral in developing the Creative Commons license for the internet, which was like, hey y'all, we need to figure out a way for all the people who are putting free music on the internet and remixing stuff and reblogging and combining and mixing. Like, we're all doing this wild stuff on the internet because it's so fun and cool and interesting and creating all this new internet culture. We need some sort of like legal designation that says, hey, I'm putting a thing online and I own it, but if you also want to use it or remix it or put it out there, you can do whatever you want as long as you say, hey, this was originally made by me. So like, here's a link. This was made by me, but here's the new version of it. And that's called, as we know, Creative Commons. And it was integral to the like founding of community-driven, ethical, creative culture on the internet, right? All of that is deeply connected to preservation, accessibility, and the Internet Archive. So, point is, I would like to have these folks on the show. I'll be reaching back out to them to see if we can set that up to talk more about this topic. But in the meantime, if you found this interesting, Oh, I will mention one other thing. I should have figured out the episode, but I will also put this in the show notes. Back in the 2G 1P days on this feed, so if you're listening in an audio app, you can simply scroll back to previous episodes. And I don't remember what episode number, but it was fairly recent. We had Jason Scott on the show to talk about the Internet Archive and media preservation. And you may know him as a pretty, an interesting, some might say somewhat eccentric gentleman who sort of became the face of the Internet Archive. He often wears, like very old-timey top hats and very astute jackets and vests and things. He's a gentleman who likes to dress up and look cool and fun on stage, and that sort of visibility gave him a little bit of a presence when he says, "Hey, we have the ability to save everything or most of it because we do not know what's going to be important in the future. We do not know what's going to be in the internet museums of the future. We do not know what type of information may inform our voting or our politics 50 years from now, or exonerate a wrongfully convicted criminal because we could have thrown this YouTube video away because it was deleted, but maybe we still have it." He talked about people uploading Japanese newspapers to the Internet Archive, and they didn't know why. And then they reached out to the uploaders, and they were like, "Yeah, we need to save this because the Chinese government is erasing the history of like their oppressive, practices from the 40s and 50s or whenever this was." And they're erasing it from libraries. So we need to digitize all these newspapers and get them on the internet so that when we study history, we can remember that these were oppressive governments. This is the kind of shit we are going to lose if the Internet Archive sued out of existence. So it's a great episode. I will link to it. It is, probably 20 or 30 episodes down in the feed, and I will link to that. Jason Scott is a very fascinating person, and I really enjoyed that conversation that we had with him. So, puppy songs, future episodes about copyright and accessibility, Internet Archive stuff that you can dig back into if you're fascinated by it. All that stuff is going to be in the show notes and the video description. And for now, again, get your questions in for Puppy Songs, influencepod69 at gmail.com. Hop into the Discord, leave a comment on Patreon, and let me know if you have questions for Puppy Songs, or if you have questions or thoughts on the copyright Internet Archive stuff, I can ask them on a future episode if we wrangle the right legal eagle to fill us in on all this stuff. For now, please, if you're borrowing podcasts from your local library, please remember to be kind and rewind them at 5x speed. If you're listening at 5x, you're going to rewind at 5x. It's the fastest way to do it. And I will talk at you in 1 week's time.